Is mindfulness and relaxation. And I'm definitely open to questions and thoughts as you have those going on. Um, I do definitely want to start off and just acknowledge that there are multiple different aspects that we're dealing with. Many, many things that are stressing us out currently. For many of us, we've had to move across the country. Some of us have moved back home to a different country since they were an international student. And so they're having to navigate all those challenges. We are separate from our friends and our student organizations and the communities that we've been part of for such a long time. And that type of a separation can be really difficult. Um, we have makeshift workstations. Some of us are doing work or class from their dining room table, and they don't really have a great place to study. And then just the ongoing adjustment of trying to navigate online learning and taking tests using the lockdown browser and just all of these different aspects of life that we've never had to deal with. And then you layer on stay at home orders for many of our states and counties. And so we don't really have the ability to leave our atmosphere, our current living situations as well. And so the frame for this whole discussion is not to reduce or minimize any of those stressors. I 100% want to acknowledge that there are many stressors out there. We're dealing with a lot and it's changing constantly. And so it can be really difficult to adjust to a certain a stressor, when then in maybe a day or two or a week later, the normal changes and there's a new precedent that's set, right? And so you have to make a whole new adjustment. But what we're going to be focusing on today is how do you better roll with the punches? How do you roll with these ongoing changes on a consistent basis so that you can still be successful in all of the things that you need to do? And that really comes down to being able to manage that like acute stress response. So when you see things, read things, when internet gets really spotty and you're in the middle of class and you feel that anxiety start to rise and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I missing? You know, all these things. How do you calm yourself down, relax, so that you can then focus on whatever the task is at hand? And you don't let these challenges and stress start to snowball and get out of control, which then starts to have multiple different impacts on multiple aspects of our life. So keep that in mind, that it's not ignoring your stress, it's not minimizing your stress, or even saying that they don't exist. It's acknowledging the stress and then moving past, hopefully, whatever that stressor is in the moment so that we're successful. And this is kind of, a really good example of that. This is the Yerkes-Dodson scale. Those are the individuals that came up with it. Really what this shows is that we need stress in our lives to be our most productive selves. And so oftentimes, especially when we're in a really high stress situation, we have this tendency to want to ignore, to get rid of, to eliminate, and just say, I just wish everything was back to normal. I wish there was no stress and I wasn't going through all of these things. But understanding that the stress that we are under can still play a positive role in our lives. And that's what this shows. So when you start to take away most or all of the stress in your life, your brain is not stimulated. You are not motivated as just an individual to put real clothes on, to take care of yourselves, to that drive to be productive and succeed is not there because we have very few external motivators that we have to try to meet. Now, motivation is primarily internal motivation, and that's where we want to tap into that drive. But so much of it is looking at an external motivation. So I have a class and I want to get a certain grade. And then you internalize that motivation and you make it part of who you are, right? And you then take that internal motivation and that drives you past all of the challenges that we have as we have these minor setbacks and roadblocks. And so when you take all of that away, we're not left with a lot. We have to be the ones to create our own motivation. And that is really difficult for us to do. And so this starts to show, one, your productivity is at its all-time lowest when you take away stress. But then also you have higher levels of depression, anxiety, and mental health issues. And so your brain can be positively impacted by the stress that you have. And so keep that, that's, a really good thing to keep in mind as we're going through this. Our optimum levels of performance has stress in our lives. And that's the middle, that's the peak of that arc. And we hope that despite all of these changes that we're going through, that your professors have hopefully been really diligent in preparing and trying to transfer things online, uh, that you're able to take advantage of all of the resources that TCU has for transition, online support, and just the support that we're willing to give to you, that you're able to take all of that and then push it into a motivation for you to still be productive. But there is the flip side of this, and that's the side when we have too much stress. There are too many things changing in our lives at one time, and it's hard for our brains to really comprehend everything. And oftentimes that can start to push us into a burnout stage, where that stress is too much. And so we will talk about the resources that are available at the end of this presentation. Um, and that is also the side of, you know, for that first slide that I went through, understanding that all of those are major stressors. Just one of those would be a major stressor, but we just coupled all of those at the same time, and that we have to be cognizant of that and understand where we are mentally, physically, and emotionally. And we still need to take care of ourselves. And so keeping that in mind, that we might need to reach out and ask people for help. And that's okay. And that TCU is here for that. But I think this is a really good example just to set the stage to show, despite all the stress, it can still be positive, and we can still be successful. Um, and so what I would love to hear is how you know that you're stressed. Like, what are those warning signs, symptoms, reactions that you have mentally, physically, emotionally, that tell you that you're stressed?
Yeah, I think for me, I get really caught up in things and I tend to have like a lot of anxiety when it comes to stress. And so I catch myself kind of going like my thoughts are just kind of like they don't stop, and I'm kind of got this ball rolling downhill and I kind of think of the worst outcomes for things if it's like school and especially being at home, kind of like if the internet's going to work, like you said, if technology's going to work, because sometimes that fails. And so for me, I catch it when I realize I'm kind of going 90 to nothing basically.
Good. That's great. That's great. Do you have any other like physical responses where you either, your heart rate might start to increase, or you clench muscles, um, you get really tired?
Yeah, I definitely have more of kind of like the heart racing kind of like high energy kind of stress. Very every now and then I kind of get the lower energy, like kind of, oh, I'm giving up. You just can't get yourself to do it because you're so stressed. But most of the time, it's kind of like really energetic, and I have to kind of find ways to calm myself down.
Right, right. I think, and the reason why I brought that up and wanted to hear some of the physical sides, um, the way that people react to stress is different for every person. Some of them are going to have more of a physiological response, and they get tired. They might get stress breakouts or hives or clench muscles, and they don't even know that they're doing it. But others start to have more of a psychological response. So their kind of thoughts are scattered. They're all over the place. You were talking about kind of like you're going 0 to 100, and your thoughts are just going and going, and that anxiety can kind of take your brain into a spot that is hard to focus in on what you need and should be working on. And then there's the emotional side, and a lot of times that emotional regulation can be really difficult. Anytime we're focusing on managing the stress that we have in our lives, we need to be cognizant of how we personally experience stress. What does it look like when I'm stressed compared to somebody else? Because the sooner that I pick up on it, and I thought it was amazing that you had already said, when my anxiety starts to go, I can be really good at picking up on um, that thought process or that reaction and understanding that I need to do something to kind of pull back and rein myself in. And I think that's really amazing. The better we can do that, the better our ability to lower our stress. Stress is the perception of life's events. And so two individuals can go through the same situation, and one individual will later on describe the stress of, it was a moderate level of stress. There were certain times that it spiked, but for the most part, it was fine, and I got through it. And then somebody else can go through the exact same experience, and they'll report stress as like a 9 the entire time. And that's just, we perceive life differently. The nice thing to know about that, though, is that we do have influence over our perceptions and the way that our brain thinks and takes in the world. And so, to be able to do that, though, being cognizant of when we're having struggles, when we're stressed out, we can then start to be proactive in managing the stress before our stress spikes to a 9 or a 10. We can hopefully understand that stress is happening in our lives. We start to be proactive about managing it on a regular basis, and our stress rises to maybe a 6 or a 7. But I can still function and be successful at a 6 or a 7. But it's really difficult to be successful at a 9 or a 10. And so I think this is a really good slide just to understand, how do I experience stress? We pointed out all of those. We have mood swings. We get angry and sad and mopey and depressed possibly. But then we could be like really manic and high, and we have mood swings all over the place. We have those physical reactions. We get tired and lethargic. We don't want to get out of bed. Our brain is fuzzy. Sometimes we can't focus. Our thoughts are all over the place. There's a variety of different ways that our bodies respond to stress. One of those pieces that I want to talk about with mindfulness is all about cluing into the world around you and understanding how you are relating in the moment to the world. And so understanding, like, as you're listening to me or a professor give a lecture, am I distracted right now? Are my thoughts going somewhere else? Why is that? Maybe it's because I'm hungry. Am I dehydrated right now? Did I not get enough sleep? Or is there something else in my life that's consuming my thoughts and taking me away? This kind of ever-present uh, perspective on life and like being in the moment, the more we can improve that, the more we can control or have influence over, maybe not control is the best word, but we can have influence over those thoughts and feelings and reactions. We can start to focus our thoughts better. And we have more influence over how our body and mind reacts to life when we clue in more, right? And so I think that that's a really good perspective to begin to take, is that we need more mindfulness in our lives. We need to clue into our reactions to the world and to understand how we're feeling. Again, not ignoring those feelings, acknowledging them, but then finding out ways that we can get past it so that we don't let those stressors derail us into a really negative spot that then spirals and impacts multiple aspects of our life. So that gives a good frame for kind of where we're talking about and how we relate to stress. And now the rest of it is really going to be focusing on different techniques we can do that are relatively easy, in the moment, quick things that are more relaxation or mindfulness techniques. They focus our thoughts. They bring us back into the present moment. And they try to cut that snowball effect. You were talking kind of this like snowball effect of my mind can go like from here to here really quick. The more that we're able to do mindfulness and relaxation techniques, the easier it is for us to kind of pull it back down and not let our brain jump up. So the first one that we're going to do, and this will be interactive, we'll all do it together, is just a breath focus. And this, in other ways, could just be taking deep breaths. Like they're kind of one and the same thing, right? Um, and so the reason you'll notice that for most of these relaxation techniques that we have, they're focusing on your breath. And there's a lot of benefits to that. There's a reason why we've chosen those. One, it's the easiest way to try to connect back with yourself because we understand how it feels and what it's like to breathe. We have that understanding. When you start getting into guided imagery and other forms of meditation or mindfulness activities, those take a little bit more practice and experience and expertise, and so that gets a little bit harder to do. So to start with, all of ours are just focusing on our body and what our breath is doing in the current moment. What that also does is it brings attention to the mind-body connection. So as I have that acute stress response, and we were talking about like possibly internet going out in the middle of a test or in a lecture, your stress is going to rise. Like in the moment, you're going to get stressed. Your heart rate's going to increase, which is going to increase your respiratory rate. So you're going to be breathing more, but your depth will decrease. So you're getting just a little bit less oxygen every time. So you're basically having a small, like, hyperventilation moment. And what that does is it triggers this in our brain, a fight or flight response, essentially. At that moment, that's when our brain starts to get flooded with a variety of different stress hormones, cortisol being one of the worst ones. And as our brain gets flooded with stress hormones, that's when we start to feel scattered thoughts. Our memory is worse. Our decision making skills are worse. Our critical thinking ability is worse. So your physical reaction to stress can then start to have a mental reaction as well. And so they kind of go hand in hand. You have start to have this mind-body connection um, with how you're experiencing that stress. If I can control my breath, I can lower my uh, respiratory rate. If I can control that and I can lower my breath rate, then I can lower my heart rate. And by doing that, I can start to decrease the severity of that acute stress response. And so that's, again, another reason why we focus on breath, is because the breath can be one of those crucial moments that starts to bring all aspects of your life back together and not letting you kind of run away in all of these different directions, and then it starts to get a little difficult. So back to that deep breathing, something as simple as just long, deliberate deep breaths. And what that looks like is you take a deep breath in through your nose for about 4 seconds. You get to count, and I say seconds is loose. You get to count whatever that is. For some people, it's a longer count, and for some people, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. But you want to try to be more deliberate and long with your count. So you go in through your nose for 4. You hold your breath for a count of 2, and then you let out your breath through your mouth for a count of 3 to 4. So you just continue this process. You go in through the nose for 4, holding for 2, out through your mouth for 3 or 4. And we're just going to practice this. So just continue to do in for 4, out for 4, in for 4, and out. try to finish one last cycle. So that is a breath focus. So it's super simple, right? You can do that in the middle of a test, not taking up a lot of time because you still have to focus on the test, right? But it's something that's so simple you could do in any situation that you're in. And even as something as simple as just trying to focus on deep and deliberate intentional breaths can start to calm your mind, your body, and all of that reaction that you have to the stress that's happening around you. And the goal is then you've now narrowed your thoughts, you've narrowed your focus, and you're able to then continue on with whatever the task is at hand. Are there any thoughts or reactions as we did our breath focus?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting just because, like, for me, when I'm stressed, I typically like to take a break from things. And I think the breath focus thing, like you said, during an exam, you can easily just sit there and do it real quick.
Mhm.
So, kind of getting away from things and getting your mind off of it for a little bit doesn't have to necessarily be a big thing. It can just be as simple as sitting there and breathing a few times. And I think that's really interesting to know.
Exactly. I love those thoughts. I mean, that was as simple as 20 seconds of just doing some deep breaths. And so, if you're in a position where you have the ability to focus just for 20 seconds, just on your breath, and that makes a significant difference in the stress levels that you're feeling, maybe you're able to incorporate that 2 and 3 and 4 times a day, an afternoon, maybe during a really stressful time, maybe in an hour. But if that's what we need to stay focused and on point, it's a really great tool to have in our tool chest. The next thing that we're going to do is actually um, a progressive muscle. Sorry, I actually skipped. This is the breath focus that we just did. We're going to actually focus on reframing our thoughts. Now, this is usually something that we talk about when we have a longer period of time, a more longer, like when I say longer period of time, usually earlier in the semester, because then you can work on this throughout the whole semester. Um, I still think that there are some immediate benefits that you get from really focusing on reframing your thoughts away from whatever the negative is. And that's really what we're going to focus on. As we were talking about in the beginning of the presentation, it's so easy to focus on all of the stress that we have and all of the things and the missed opportunities in what we wished life was. And remember, we still need to allow ourselves to have those moments, but we can't let those moments consume all of our thought process because we can't move past that. Currently, it's the normal that we have. And so continuing just to focus on that and the negative aspects of it will then start to penetrate or permeate throughout all aspects of our life. How do we allow ourselves the space to experience those feelings? But then, how do we reframe? Like, once we've had that moment, how do we then reframe our thoughts back to a positive state so that we can continue to be focused on what we want and have a more successful outlook on life, which will then probably relate back into our actual physical success in what we're doing. Um, so much of that comes back to increasing your internal power. That's essentially just a fancy way of saying a growth mindset or improving your self efficacy, your belief in your success. So the more that I believe in myself, that I will be successful despite the challenges, the greater chance I will be successful. And I will be able to handle challenges as they come at me at a better level because I will have a higher level of confidence in my skills, right? That all of that ability is increasing your internal power. Now, what I would love is for all of the times, like even when we have the most stressful situations, We have the confidence of a baby in a watermelon gladiator outfit, right? There's no self-doubt in this kid's mind, right? Like he's going to take on the world. Unfortunately, though, when we get really stressed, our brain, and this is kind of a psychological phenomena, it just the majority of the time, for the vast majority of the population, we go negative. So every time we get stressed, and the more that stress increases, the more frequent our negative self-talk statements will be about ourselves, and the severity of them will increase. They'll be more deliberate and they'll be worse thoughts about ourselves. So, how do we stop that, right? You give yourself the ability to have some grief and processing, and then we reframe back to a positive, right? So that it doesn't continue to derail us. And this is just, we call it 5 R's. It's a very simple way, a process to try to reel back your thoughts, and to guide them, to direct them towards a positive direction. The first piece is that we have to recognize that we said a negative thing about ourselves. And so this really starts to get to, if your test, a test situation is a really easy example to have. When we have a really large exam, a lot of weight in it, especially now we're concerned that we're taking our classes online, and learning might not be, we might not feel like our learning is at the same level as it was when I was in an in-person class. So it feels like the stakes are even that much higher than they were before. Um, I spend all of this time studying. I do note cards, and I memorize all of the terms and all of the stats and facts and all of that, right? Like I know my note cards. I then move on to practice exams, and I go through a couple different problem sets and all of those. And I'm doing well. I'm getting above an 85 on those practice exams. I take those a couple times. And then I'm able to connect with friends, on Zoom, and we're doing these online group study sessions, right? And I'm able to teach my classmates the material, because you know it so well. And when you get to that point, we say you've mastered the content, when you have the ability to start teaching others. Yet then when I sit down for the exam and we press like start or whatever, right, on the lockdown browser, and I start my exam, initially the very first thoughts that come to mind are, I don't know if I can do this. You're not ready. You're going to fail. You're not good enough for this. And so much of that is just self-doubt coming from the stress that we're in, right? But there's nothing about, what we've just gone through the last week of studying that shows that we won't be successful, because we've been successful in every aspect of what we've done. And so that's where we can take those thoughts and say, yeah, this is a stressful situation. I get it, but no, I am going to be successful, and I know I'm going to be successful. And this is how we do it, right? So as you recognize that you just had a negative self-talk statement, from there, you actively refuse the statement. Now, this active refusal is a little different than just trying to, gloss over it, to push it to the side and move on. Active refusal is whispering to yourself, no, stop, don't say that. That's not true. Writing on a piece of paper, no, or stop. Um, Imaging, like imagine, a stop sign, a hand being placed out, whatever it is that you have to do. All of those are forms of active refusal. And studies show that the more that you can actively refuse a statement, the greater chance that it will leave your headspace. If we don't, and we just kind of acknowledge and push to the side, that thought just kind of sits there in the back of our brain. And there's not as good a chance that it's actually going to leave our brain space. So the next time we get a challenge or we get stressed in any way, comes right back, and we're thinking, see, I'm not ready for this. I'm not going to be successful. I'm going to fail. Rest. Rest goes hand in hand with refusal. Now we're in the middle of an exam. or a stressful situation, we don't have the time to take 20 or 30 seconds to just pause, right? So when I say that, that's literally just 1 or 2 deep breaths, right? That's a second. It goes hand in hand with active refusal because both of those work in tandem to let the negative thought leave your brain. So again, if we just kind of brush over it, we haven't allowed our brain to move past that thought and it tries to hold on to it. It tries to stick with it. Once you've done that, you replace it with a positive statement, hopefully something tangible that you've done or that you know that reinforces that you will be successful. And so what it starts to look like is you sit down and you say, I don't know, that's not even that bad of a statement, but it's not a positive statement. You're like, wait, no, that shouldn't be. Stop saying that, right? You rest, take one deep breath. I know I'm going to be successful because I memorized all of my note cards. I got above an 85 on both of my practice exams, and I was teaching my classmates this material. I know I'm going to be successful. And you resume whatever you're doing. That was a lot of words that I used to describe that. But when you do this in practice, this is a very quick, like 5-second little thought process. It takes up almost no time. Um, but it's a really easy way to stop your thoughts when they start to snowball and get a little out of control, and it's hard for you to rein them in, and it starts distracting you. You're not able to focus in on whatever that task is. This is a really quick way that you kind of stop it, and you're then able to hopefully move forward on the exam with the focus that you need or whatever that challenge is that you're facing. And you're able to give as much of your brain power to that task rather than being distracted and diverted to another area. Um, so with that, are there thoughts or questions about reframing thoughts?
I think the refusal part's pretty interesting because, when you think about kind of changing your thoughts, you think of it as like a totally internal thing. Like you just think about it and say, nah, that's not real. But there's so much of a difference in actively refusing it because you're actually making yourself sit there, write it down. Like, no, this isn't why. You're not going to do bad. You're not going to fail. And I think it's important to be active about that because it even just a little action, just writing it down, I think that makes such a big difference.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And what I love about that is that you might find another question, right? Like the sixth question on the exam, you look at it and you say, "Holy cow, I don't know what any of this information is. I just miss that class altogether?" And you might start to feel that stress response again, right? And so it's a tangible thing. You can go back to that test or exam or wherever it is, and you can see it written down. And you're like, "Oh, right, 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 right. That's a good reminder. Okay, I know you can do this. You're ready to go, right?" Um, so yeah, I really appreciate your thoughts. Um, on this, there's a variety of ways you can do this. This was one way you could do that. Um, being able to reframe your thoughts could even be an extension of journaling. Um, again, you allow yourself the ability to experience stress, to process the stressors. But by journaling, you can then start to reframe your thoughts and get everything out on paper, so it leaves your headspace, hopefully. But then you're able to then focus on, well, yeah, these things suck and they're stressful. But what are the positives I'm going to get out of this? What am I still doing that is successful, and how am I impressed with my resilience during these times, right? And you can really start to connect with those thoughts on a deeper level as you're journaling or whatever that might look like. Um, and so this type of a process can look a variety of different ways. This is just one way to do that, but I think being more cognizant of how to reframe your thoughts, that is a tool that we can use for the rest of our lives in any situation that we find ourselves in, not just academic stress, but social stress, and some of those social anxieties, job interviews, giving presentations, whatever it might look like, if we have this ability to kind of reason and rationalize with ourselves, to process with ourselves, we can go through that process no matter where we are and what the experience is. So at this time, I want to do another stress management or relaxation exercise. Um, and so for this one, we're going to do progressive muscle relaxation. Have you ever done that?
I think so, but it's been a while.
Okay. So progressive muscle relaxation, really, it's a combination of muscle contractions as well as deep breathing. Um, Again, it goes back to that mind-body connection, right? We control our breath rate. We can lower our heart rate. We can hopefully lower the stress response that we feel. But as we contract the muscles throughout our body, and I'm going to guide us through this, we'll start at our feet and we'll work our way up our body to different body parts. You contract the muscle group as you're breathing in deeply. You hold the breath and the muscle contraction at the same time, like a second maybe. And then you release both the muscle contraction and the breath. And at that time, you have a little bit of a calming sensation come over your body. Um, when we get stressed, so many of the times we clench muscles in our body and we don't even know that we're doing it. Or, like now, when we're living almost all of our lives on our laptops, our posture oftentimes is really poor. And so we can start to have musculoskeletal issues and soreness and pain. And so contracting those muscles, it starts to relieve some of the lactic acid and other byproducts that are built up in our muscles that are potentially creating a lot of what this tension is that we're feeling, this soreness inside of our muscles. So what it does, again, it's this kind of physical body and mind relaxation, calming activity. And so what we're going to do this together, find a natural position in your chair. Try to sit forward so you're not like leaning backwards, taking a nap. What we're going to do is I'm going to say the feet first, and I'm going to say contract the muscles in your feet. That means curl your toes. We'll contract and breathe in deeply for a couple seconds, hold for a second, and then release both. And then we'll move on to a different body part. Okay. So with that, contract the muscles in your feet, breathe in deeply, holding the contraction and the breath, and release. So we're going to move to our calves next. So you can keep your feet on the ground. You don't need to lift your heels up. But what we want to do is try to make your lower legs strong and breathe in at the same time. So breathe in and contract those muscles. And release both. Good. To our upper legs, so our thighs. Again, you can keep your legs on the ground, your feet on the ground. Try not to kick your leg out. Just try to make your upper leg strong and breathe in, holding the breath and the contraction, and release. Good. From here, we're going to move to our stomachs. So it gets hard to contract your abs and to breathe in deeply. So focus on diaphragm breathing rather than belly breathing. And all you need to do is brace your stomach. You don't need to like suck your belly button into your spine. So we're going to brace our stomach and breathe in deeply, holding both. And release. Good. We're going to move to our fists, our hands next, and we're going to make fists. So make fists and breathe in. And release. Good. To our upper arms next, biceps, triceps. So keeping our arms still, but just making our arms strong. And breathe in. And release. Good. To our shoulders next. So we're going to raise up our shoulders and breathe in. and release. Good. So the next one we're going to do is our face. We're going to scrunch up our face and we're going to breathe in. So breathe in and scrunch your face and release. Awesome. So that's progressive muscle relaxation. How did that feel as we were going through it?
I think it helps kind of pinpoint where tension is kind of naturally that you don't realize because sometimes like I say maybe like my arms, there's probably a lot more tension up there. And so when I went to kind of like add more tension, it wasn't that difficult because there was already some. And then when you kind of breathe out, you kind of let it all go. And then I think you kind of realize where you kind of naturally have some tension in your body.
Right, right. And with that in mind, you can do this multiple times throughout the whole body in a row if you want. If you find one area and you're like, oh, wow, I had no idea that I was so tense there, you could just do that. Like you could do shoulders 3 times in a row. It's really simple, it's easy. The whole process took less than a minute to do. Um, you can do it anywhere, even in public. I've done this in meetings, in class, whatever, in coffee shops, library. Um, I don't do like the face one, but if anything, people just think you're a really like Zen breather. You're taking these really long, deep, deliberate breaths, but they don't necessarily know what you're doing outside of that. But I think, again, the value of this is the mind body connection that you have, the overall relaxation that you feel, not just mentally, but physically when you start to release those muscles. Um, and the whole focus of this is to bring your thoughts and attention and be mindful. So, again, back to the beginning of the presentation, be more mindful of how we feel in the world right now. And the more that we can hone in on that, that starts to clear our brain from all of the stress and the distractors and the things that's going around, and we bring it back to one moment, right? The better we can do that, then we can focus back on the task at hand. We do want to take some time and acknowledge some really great resources that are out there, different apps. These are just two of them. Headspace app is a really amazing one. It has meditations, relaxation exercises. They're all guided. It has um, different like guided imageries that you might want to do, sound effects. Calm.com is another one, both in online form and in an app form. You can create like your own custom white noise if you want that. I think Calm.com even has just like novels, little short stories that people just read you in amazingly soothing voices, and maybe it helps you fall asleep quicker. So it's just one of those things. Any one of these apps can be really beneficial in helping you again relax, hone your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, so that our stress doesn't take us into a dangerous space. The last activity that I want to do is actually a breath meditation. And so you'll notice we started with breath focus, which is super easy and really simple. Progressive muscle relaxation got a little bit more involved, a little bit more practice, and then meditation is just a little bit more. So it's kind of 3 different levels of relaxation activities that we have. Again, it's a breath focus. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to guide us through this, and we're just going to take a couple minutes to meditate. Meditation, though, for many of us, when we first start meditating, it actually relaxes us to the point where sometimes we get sleepy and want to fall asleep. The ultimate goal is that it actually allows us to train our brain to focus better on one thing. So we're able to push away outside distractions and refocus our thoughts on whatever it is that we're telling ourselves that we need to focus on, right? So for this activity, it's going to be our breath. So as you start having these thoughts and hear things and get distracted, you want to acknowledge them. You say, I heard a noise, it was distracting, but I'm pushing it away and I'm focusing back on my breath. And the ability to do that, the more practice that you have in that, you can start doing that like when you study or you take tests. You get distracted from an outside thought or an outside noise, and pretty soon you get so honed in on whatever it is you're working on that you don't even hear all of this outside chatter and noise and things and distractions, right? So you're actually able to hyper focus the better you get at meditation. Um, so with this, um, just sit comfortable in however you want that to look. If you want to close your eyes, you can close your eyes, but you're not required to. Um, and I just want to sit for a little bit, getting ready and prepping ourselves to start meditating. And once you think you've found yourself and you're ready to start, we're going to start counting our breaths. So we're going to count in 1, count out 2, in 3, out 4, in 5, out 6. Continuing to count at your own pace. As these thoughts come in and distract you, acknowledge them, push them out, and focus back on your breath. In 14, out 15. In 16, out 17. As we get more in tune with our breath, you can stop counting and start noticing how it feels to breathe. What are the sensations you have when the breath goes in and when the breath goes out? How do your muscles feel as you hone in on your breath? Breathing in 30, breathing out 31. Breathing in 32, breathing out 33. Okay. I'd like you to start bringing your thoughts back to the group. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back. So that was a very simple, easy, and short. That was only like 2 minutes meditation. So I'm not sure if you've ever meditated before, but how was this compared to maybe some of the others for relaxation?
Yeah, meditation is one of my favorite things. I actually started doing it this semester just because I'm taking this class, and the professor before class we always have set time for meditation. And I had never really meditated
Wow.
before that, and I fell in love with it just because it's so relaxing, and even just like a short time, like 2 minutes, like when you open your eyes, you really do feel refocused. And that's something you just have to do to really understand. And so I've tried to keep meditating on my own as I've been here. And when we join that class on Zoom, we actually still have that time of meditation, and it's cool because I like guided meditation so far because I'm not the best at doing it on my own yet, and so I go on YouTube all the time. There's tons on there, and then like another resource for me is like we have like an Alexa at home, like one of the Echoes, and you can have her play like rain noises and all those kinds of
Oh yeah,
relaxing
yeah.
things.
Hmm.
I really love. But yeah, that meditation's one of
Hmm.
my favorite things to do.
That's awesome. Great. I'm so happy to hear that. It is definitely not for everybody though. I highly recommend everybody give it a try, and not just once, because you might not like it the first time, but after two or three or four times of trying it, you might start to see that you're kind of getting it a little bit better, and you're able to do it a little bit longer, and you might start to have an appreciation for it. But there's just immense benefits that you get mentally and physically, emotionally from regular meditation in the felt stress levels on a daily basis. And so I think it's a really important one to try to include in your regular relaxation techniques. Um, I do want to focus back on some campus resources, especially during these next 5 weeks or so, where we're living online and what we have available for you. And before I exit out of this, uh, y'all got this. You're going to do great. I'm going to exit out of this because I actually have um, the website pulled up. Um, are you able to? Whoa, sorry. Can you see that?
No, it disappeared.
Oh, can you see it now?
Yeah, yeah, there it is.
Okay. So TCU at Home. This is a major initiative that multiple different departments within TCU have come together to create all of our programs, or as many of them as possible, and our services to be able to provide those still to TCU students remotely and online. And so student activities built this web page to be able to host all of these announcements for programs and activities that are happening. And so just the same as we held concerts and comedians and all of these social engagements in person, you can still watch a comedian or a concert in live time for TCU students, only for TCU students. So it's not like just a national thing that everybody has a, the ability to do. This is specifically for you, and you can do it from your home. So you still have a little bit of TCU with you. Um, so this is just student activities main page, and there's a link to the virtual community here. When you click on that, it'll take you to the main TCU at Home. And so here there's a virtual support services, which we'll go to in a second. We're going to have regular videos from the different departments talking about their content areas and how it can benefit certain students. And so this is Lee McCracken, who works in religious and spiritual life, talking about spiritual illness and how that can be beneficial for our students. But then what's really great is this is a section of things you can do at any time. So you're not um, clicking into a Zoom meeting. You can, there's things about like doing an online workout class. When you click on this link, it's going to have a variety of different suggestions for different online workouts. This meditate link has guides for how to do 3 and 4 or 5 different types of meditations. You have different connects. And so it gives you a lot of different ideas for how to connect with the world, how to manage stress, how to still be healthy and well throughout this period. Um, Lastly, so those are some fun activities that you can do. I want to highlight these virtual support services. And so understand that academic advising, the Career Center, counseling services, alcohol and drug education, all of these groups are offering online versions of the support that they had for you when you were in person. And so you can click on all of these and it gives you the phone numbers and it kind of tells you how to interface with those departments, depending on whatever your needs are and your thoughts are. And so understanding though that relaxation and mindfulness techniques can be really beneficial to manage your stress on a regular basis, but sometimes it can be a lot. It can be too much. You have that downward, excuse me, you have that downward curve of the Yerkes-Dodson scale, and we start to hit burnout, and it's a little bit too much. And that's where these resources can still be really helpful. And so remembering that we're here for you and we have those available. So with that, are there any last minute questions or thoughts that you have?
No, this has been great, kind of as a refresher of different techniques and ideas you can use to kind of help recenter and kind of help limit stress during this stressful time. So, yeah, thank you for sharing all these and kind of going over the TCU at home page as well, because I hadn't been on the website. I've just been kind of keeping up on the What to Do TCU website.
Yeah,
So, it's nice to see that it's all kind of put together in one space.
yeah, definitely. We have a lot of options for you. Um, and so I'll stop my share and bring us back to the yeah, we're so happy that you stopped in and shared with us, and we hope that you're able to take a couple of these things and still be successful in everything you do. So have a good day.